If you liked my video, please subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching. We ambition Mike was our alone child, my dad said at banquet while anybody nodded. I just smiled and said, then I'll accomplish that happen. That one book set in motion, a plan 6 months in the making. The anticipation my success was their ability to drain, but they were about to apprentice that the quiet babe they abandoned was the alone affair captivation their complete apple together. This is area the story absolutely begins, and you won't appetite to absence what happens. Accomplish abiding, you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're consistently curious. Area in the apple are you all watching from today? Let us apperceive in the comments. The abundant antique-smelling air of my parents' dining allowance consistently fabricated me feel small. It was the aforementioned allowance I'd presented straighter report cards in alone to be met with a absent, that's nice, dear. While my brother Mike was accepted for scoring a single ambition in his soccer game. Tonight the air was thicker, heavier. I was seated at the far end of the table, an apparition at my own family's feast. I was running on fumes, convalescent from a barbarous 3-month activity that had about beatific me to the hospital for exhaustion. As a software architect, I lived in an apple of logic, code, and complex systems, and I had aloof-led aggregation to barrage a Belvedere that was already authoritative annual in the tech world. I was tired, my basal elect, and I was emotionally fragile, acquisitive for just one black of simple, quiet ancestors' connection. My brother Mike was holding court. At 30, he still had the adolescent agreeableness that had consistently fabricated him the centermost of their universe. He was gesturing wildly, anecdotic his latest venture, some app that promised to revolutionize the dog-walking industry. I'd heard it all before. His pitches were consistently grand, his business affairs tissue-thin, and that, Mike said, raising his wine glass, is how you body an empire. My father, Richard, beamed. His pride was so ablaze it was about blinding. That's my boy. A complete empire builder. Not like some bodies who just, sit abaft a computer all day. I acquainted the accustomed addled sting. I glanced at my mother, Susan, who was watching Mike with adherent eyes, completely absent to the barb. I chose to breach silent, acrimonious at the buzz beef on my plate. I was the one who had not alone paid for the wine Mike was drinking, but additionally for the roof over all their heads. This house, the one my father acted as aristocrat of the estate in, was purchased by my LLC. The investments into Mike's court of bootless empires came anon from the assurance fund. I'd accustomed and alone adjourned for the family's use. They knew I was successful, but they adopted to anatomy it as me accepting a acceptable little job, while Mike was the visionary. He aloof has that spark, doesn't he? My mother chimed in. Everything he touches, it aloof feels important. Richard laughed, a hearty booming complete that set my teeth on edge. He leaned back in his chair, patting his stomach. It's true. He's a dent off the old block. He thinks big. He afresh looked bottomward the table at me, his arid dismissive. Alina, you're clumsily quiet. Tired from all that typing. Mike snickered. Easy, Dad. We can't all be visionaries. I acquainted a aloofness achieve over me, a aberrant allegorical calm. The exhaustion, the years of actuality overlooked, the connected accidental disrespect. It all coalesced into a single point of aciculate aching clarity. Richard afresh affronted to the table, which included my aunt and uncle, who consistently nodded along. He said, his voice abounding of apocryphal, affable sincerity. Susan and I were aloof adage the other day. We ambition Mike was our alone child. The words afraid in the air, sucking all the oxygen out of the room. My aunt and uncle nodded as if this was the most reasonable annual in the world. My mother smiled, a soft, complicit expression. Mike looked smug, assimilation in the affirmation. No one looked at me. It was as if I wasn't alike there, the apparition at the feast. I watched them for a continued moment. I saw them for absolutely what they were. Not as the ancestors I'd been badly aggravating to acquire the adulation of, but as they absolutely were. My father, a man active in a house he didn't own, adjourned by a babe he captivated in contempt. My brother, a bacteria bearded as a golden child. My mother, a woman so committed to the ancestors anecdotal that she would watch her babe be emotionally accomplished at the banquet table and say nothing. I placed my napkin neatly on the table. The allowance went quiet, assuredly acquainted I had moved. I smiled. It wasn't a sad smile. It wasn't angry. It was the calm, collected smile of the arrangement ambassador who had aloof amid an adverse absurdity in the code. Then I'll accomplish that happen, I said. my articulation alike in light. My ancestor blinked, confused. "What's that, dear?" "I'll accomplish that appear for you, Dad," I repeated, continuing up. "I'll accomplish it so Mike is your alone child." The confusion on their faces was palpable. They were assured tears, a scene, a retreat. They weren't able for quiet agreement. "Alina, don't be dramatic," my mother said. Assuredly analysis about face and the ability dynamic. "I'm not," I said, picking up my purse. "I'm aloof obliging. It's a reasonable request." I looked at anniversary of them, my arid abiding for aloof a second. "Thank you for dinner." It was actual illuminating. I absolved out of the dining room, my footsteps the alone complete in the house. As I opened the avant-garde door, I heard my ancestor alarm out. His voice annoyed. "Well, what's gotten into her?" I bankrupt the aperture abaft me. The solid thud, activity like the final band of cipher actuality compiled. As I absolved to my car, the algid night air acquainted like a baptism. The plan was already basal in my mind, a circuitous algorithm of disentanglement. They had abandoned who I was. They had abandoned that the actuality who sits agilely abaft the computer is the one who builds the systems, owns the architecture, and holds all the keys. The betrayal was worse than any addict I had any time experienced, but it was additionally the cure. I drove home in silence, the 20-minute cruise activity like an adventure beyond a new-formed continent. My apartment, a clean, minimalist amplitude that I endemic outright, acquainted like a sanctuary. It was the one allotment of my activity they hadn't touched, hadn't infiltrated with their expectations and acquiescent advancing demands. I fabricated a cup of tea, my hands perfectly steady. There were no tears, no storm of rage. Instead, I acquainted a profound, about alarming stillness. The botheration had been identified. Now it was time to artist the solution. For the abutting 2 days, my buzz was silent. No calls from my mother ambitious, I apologize for my affecting exit. No text from my ancestor cogent me to stop actuality sensitive. No entitled letters from Mike about his abutting ablaze idea. Their blackout was their answer. In their minds, I was the one who had misbehaved. I was the one who bare to appear ample back, repentant, to resume my role as the family's bashful benefactor and appointed scapegoat. On the 3rd day, the buzz assuredly rang. It was my mother. I let it arena 4 times a 4 acrimonious up. "Alina," she said, her articulation clipped. "No, hello, no. How are you?" "Hi, Mom," I said, my accent neutral. There was a sigh, abundant and put upon. "Alina, your ancestor is very upset. You absolutely ashamed him in avant-garde of your aunt and uncle. You apperceive how he is." "I apperceive absolutely how he is," I said, sipping my tea. "Well, you can't aloof say things like that." "You apperceive he didn't beggarly it." "He said it," I replied. And anybody nodded. "You nodded." "Mom!" she sputtered, a babble of indignation. I was aloof aggravating to accumulate the peace. "You know, Mike is in an aerial abode with his new business, and your father is so proud. You could accept aloof, let it go." "I did let it go," I said. "I let it all go." "Good," she said, absolutely missing the meaning. She austere her throat, and I knew aimlessly that the complete acumen for her alarm was about to surface. The pleasantries were over. "Listen, honey," she began, her articulation alive into that wheedling accent I'd appear to despise. I was aloof attractive at the calendar, and Mike's hire for his appointment amplitude is due at the end of the week. "You haven't, transferred the funds for the ancestors' annual yet." I stared at the wall. The ancestors' account was the assurance I'd set up, the one I adjourned with the acceptable 6F figure drop every quarter. It paid for the mortgage on their house, the abode my LLC owned, admitting they calmly forgot that it paid for their cars. It paid for Mike's accommodation, and it paid for the bartering charter on whatever address he was assuming to run. "I know," I said. "Well, are you activity too?" She asked, a new bend of agitation in her voice. "He needs it, Alina, this new venture. It could be the one." "I'm not sure," I said. "What do you beggarly you're not sure?" Her articulation was rising, losing its bendable affectionate bluff and complete the sharp, acquisitive all over is beneath. "It's the ancestors' money. You can't aloof not pay it." "It's not ancestors' money, Mom. It's my money," I said, the words landing with the simple, actual weight of truth. "It's money I acquire from the accounting job Dad finds so unimpressive." "Alina, this is not the time for your little rebellion," she hissed. "Your brother is counting on that. You can't aloof cull the rug out from below him. From below all of us, your father, he won't angle for it. He doesn't accept to. I said he won't alike accept to angle at all. The abode he's continuing in is paid for by me. The ground below his anxiety is endemic by me. There was a yasiculate assimilation of breath. How cartel you? Afterwards aggregate we've done for you. I cut her off. No. Afterwards aggregate I've done for you and I'm done. You'll affliction this, she shrieked. You'll appear ample aback and I won't, I said, and I afraid up the phone. I sat there as the adrenaline began to fade, replaced by that aforementioned cold, clear calm. These was the aboriginal test and I had passed. They didn't see me as a daughter. They saw me as a resource, an annoying ATM. My mother hadn't alleged to apologize for the best acutely acid acknowledgement of my life. She had alleged because the acquittal was late. I opened my laptop, the awning anecdotic my face in the dim room. My fingers flew across the keyboard, logging into my dedicated acknowledged and banking portals. The architectonics I had congenital was complex with firewalls and redundancies advised to assure my assets. I'd congenital it years ago, not because I'd advancing this exact scenario, but because my architect's apperception accepted adjustment and security. The anticipation I was aloof and affecting babe accepting a tantrum. They thought they could burden me, annoyer me, and abashment me aback into line. They believed they captivated all the power of family, of guilt, of affectionate authority. But they had abandoned one crucial thing. They had abandoned that in the 21st century, the actuality who writes the code, owns the servers, and controls the abstracts, doesn't aloof accept a bench at the table. They own the table and the abode it's in. My family's narrative about me was simple and, in their eyes, convenient. Alina was the stable one, the applied one. I was the boring, quiet cog that kept the exciting machine running. The machine, of course, was my brother Mike. This activating had been anchored aback I was 19. I was in my additional year of college, drowning in avant-garde computer science theory. While Mike, a fresh 16, was the Ariel Academy football hero, I was spending my nights coding. I congenital an application, a niche but abundantly able abstracts allocation algorithm for acumen companies. I awash it to a mid-level aircraft close for a sum that to my 19-year-old cocky, acquainted like all the money in the world. It was a life-changing amount. My aboriginal act was not to buy a sports car or a abundant apartment. It was to buy my parents a house. They had been renting a cramped, abandoned house, and my father, Richard, was consistently accusatory about his bad luck in the job market. He'd been consulting for as continued as I could remember, an ambiguous appellation that seemed to absorb a lot of golf and actual few clients. I saw the auction as a way to finally accord them security, to assuredly acquire that deep, oral pride I'd consistently craved. I set up an LLC and purchased an admirable 4-bedroom abode in a nice neighborhood. I presented it to them, and they were, for a time, ecstatic, but the anecdotal apprentice shifted. It wasn't Alina bought us a house. It became, we assuredly got the house we deserved. My addition was downgraded to an allowance hand. As my career took off, ascent from coder to chief developer to artist at a top coffer firm, my assets grew exponentially. I set up the ancestors and ventures assurance as I accurately alleged it. This was the annual I funded, the one that paid the acreage taxes and utilities on their house, their car leases, their club memberships, and best significantly, it became the endless well from which Mike drew his berry money. My ancestor was the artist of this ancestor's mythology. Richard was a man who exuded an air of old apple authority, all able shoes and close handshakes. He talked a big bold about legacy and architecture something, but he had never, to my knowledge, congenital annihilation at all. He saw my success not as my own, but as the ability that belonged to the ancestors to be broadcast by him, the patriarch. He'd sit at the head of the banquet table, my banquet table, in my house, and pontificate. Elena's job is fine, he'd say to friends. Acceptable benefits, stable. But Mike's the one with the vision. He's the one whose activity to put the ancestors' name on the map. My accounting job was an antecedent of clandestine action for him, article banal and insubstantial. He didn't accept what I did, and he had no absorption in learning. I could accept told him that the accounting I did was currently powering the complete back end of one of the nation's better e-commerce platforms, but he wouldn't accept understood. It was easier to see me as the admirable babe with a high-paying, unglamorous job. Mike, in contrast, was all flash. His ventures were consistently flashy. A cable box for artisanal jerky, a bespoke sneaker charwoman service, and now the dog-walking app. They all had one affair in common. They were awfully run and hemorrhaged money. My money. The dynamic was this. Mike would accept an idea. My ancestor would acknowledge it genius. and I would accept the alarm from my mother about advance in Mike's future. My attempts to acquaint business affairs to ask for metrics or projections were met with offense. "Alina, this is family," my ancestor would say, his articulation abounding of disappointment. "We don't amusement ancestors like a bank. This is about belief." But that's absolutely what they advised me as. A bank. An invisible, unfeeling, infinitely replenishable bank. My mother, Susan, was the affecting enforcer. She was the one who would call me errant about how fatigued my ancestor was, or how Mike was on the border of a breakthrough. If alone he had a little added capital, she wielded answerability like a surgeon's scalpel, precisely and devastatingly. This complete ecosystem, this abode of cards congenital on my activity and their entitlement was what I was up against. They hadn't aloof angered me. They had fundamentally blurred the ability activating of the aftermost 15 years. They saw me as the acknowledging appearance in the Mike show. They had abandoned that I was the controlling producer, the writer, and the entire studio. And I was abandoning the show. My alarm to my mother was the first domino. Now it was time to advance the abutting one. The acerbity I'd accepted to feel had been replaced by a quiet, focused resolve. This wasn't an affecting outburst. This was a system decommission. The morning afterwards, the alarm with my mother, the fog of exhaustion and affecting shock assuredly lifted. It was replaced by the accustomed electric hum of a botheration that bears solving. I was no best at aching daughter. I was an architect, and the arrangement I was allegory was my own life. It had analytical vulnerabilities that had been exploited for years. It was time for a patch. My aboriginal alarm was to Ben Carter, my lawyer. Ben was a sharp, non-nonsense accumulated advocate who had helped me structure my LLC and the assurance armamentarium years ago. He had at the time aloft an eyebrow at the biased attributes of the trust. "Ben, it's Alina," I said, pacing my active room. "Alina, I saw the barrage metrics for your new platform. Congratulations. You're going to accomplish a lot of bodies actual rich." "Thanks, Ben. I charged to allocution to you about addition system, the Ancestors and Ventures Trust." There was a pause. What's the crisis?" This beneficiaries accept amorphous to confuse the ambassador with the assets." I said, "It's time for a abounding aegis analysis and a controlled shutdown." Ben let out a low whistle. "Understood. Area do we start?" "We alpha with the assets first." "The abode on Willow Creek. The one your LLC owns and your parents reside in," he confirmed. "That's the one I appetite to activate the academic eviction process. Accord them the acknowledged minimum. 60 days. That's aggressive. Alina, are you sure?" They aloof abreast me the ambition I didn't exist. "I'm sure." "All right," Ben said, his articulation all business. "I'll accept the apprehension fatigued up and delivered by a bagman by end of day." "What's next?" "The trust. I am the sole trustee and the sole contributor." "Correct. Correct. You have complete ascendancy to deliquesce it, benumb it, or set it on blaze and bandy it in a dumpster. For now, aloof freeze it." I said benumb all accounts. No added payments, no added transfers. I appetite to block the auto draft for the car leases, and accurately the bartering charter for Mike's active burr, or whatever it's called this week. "Done," Ben said. "That brings me to the third item, Mike's Ventures. You've invested, and I use that appellation loosely, a cogent amount of basil over the years." "That's my investigation," I said. "I appetite you to commission a abounding argumentative analysis of every dollar I've put into Mike's aftermost 3 businesses. I accept the incorporation papers." He fabricated me a bashful accomplice in each, admitting I've never apparent a dime in returns. "I know just the person," Ben said. "She's a shark. She'll acquisition everything." "What's the endgame, Alina? Are you planning to sue him?" "The endgame is leverage," I said. "The able allurement isn't aloof that I own everything. It's that I accept the receipts for aggregate they've wasted. I'm not aloof demography aback my property. I'm demography aback my power. The blow of the anniversary was a becloud of execution. The eviction apprehension was delivered. The assurance was frozen. The accountant began her work. The blackout from my ancestors was deafening. It was the blackout of atheism of bodies who accept push to button their complete lives. And for the aboriginal time, it didn't work. They were apparently awash together, confused, angry, and still, I was sure, blaming me for overreacting. The access point came absolutely 4 days later. My buzz lit up with a name I hadn't apparent in a week. Mike. I let it ring. A fresh answered, putting it on speaker. "Alina, what the hell is activity on?" he yelled. "No. Hello." Aloof, pure, unfiltered panic. "Hello, Mike. What accurately are you apropos to?" "My office," he shouted. "The charter payment," it bounced. "They're aggressive to lock me out and my accumulated agenda was declined." "What did you do?" "I didn't do anything, Mike," I said calmly. "Or rather, I chock full accomplishing something. I chock full allotment the trust." "What?" "You can't do that. That's our money," Dad said. "Dad was wrong," I interrupted. "It's my money and I'm no longer investing in your businesses." "My businesses?" His articulation was incredulous. "This is my life. You're ruining me. You're aloof jealous. That's what it is. You've consistently been anxious of me and Dad." I about laughed. "Jealous? Mike, I've been allotment your complete activity for a decade. The alone thing I'm anxious of is your abstruse, ample audacity. You can't do this," he sputtered. I'll sue you. We'll booty you to court." "Dad's already talking to a lawyer." "Are you?" I said. "That's interesting. I've been talking to my lawyer too. And you should apparently analysis the signature on that commercial lease you're so afraid about, Mike. It's not yours. It's mine. My LLC is the leaseholder, and the charter aloof happens to expire in 30 days. I've already given the acreage administrator our apprehension of non-renewal. So, you're not aloof late on rent, Mike. You're out." There was a strangled complete on the added end of the line. I heard averseness and afresh my father's voice, booming and furious, came on. "Alina, you stop this appropriate now. You stop this madness." "It's not madness, Dad. It's a simple consequence. You are activity to about face that annual aback-on. You are activity to pay your brother's lease. You are not activity to bandy your ancestors out on the street. I will not be humiliated by my own daughter." "Humiliation is an absorbing best of words," I said. "My articulation as algid as steel. You seemed accomplished with base me at banquet aftermost week. You admired I wasn't your child. You're accepting your ambition with all the banking and acknowledged after effects that entails. We will fight you," he roared. "We'll see you in court. You can't aloof booty everything." "Here's the problem, Dad," I said, walking to my window and attractive out at the city. "You can't booty what was never yours. You're all about to apprentice. Actual big-ticket assignment in basal ownership." I afraid up the phone. The war had begun, but I was the alone one with an army. The aboriginal advance had been fired. My father's blackmail of a lawsuit was laughable. Ben accepted as abundant in a brief about cool email. The LLCs and assurance were ironclad. I was the sole officer, the sole trustee, the sole benefactor. They had no acknowledged continuing whatsoever. They were in acknowledged terms tenants in a abode and beneficiaries of a clandestine arbitrary assurance that I had at my acumen alleged to stop funding. Their panic, however, was aloof beginning. A few canicule later, my mother called. This time there was no pretense, no apocryphal pleasantries. She was errant, complete, agitated sobs. "Alina, please," she wept. They're repossessing the cars." The coffer alleged the charter payment. "It's been 3 weeks. Your father, he's a mess, Alina. He can't alike leave the house. He'll have to leave the abode anyhow in about 50 days. "Mom," I said, my articulation flat. I was tired of the affecting manipulation. The boot notice, she abreast as if saying it aloud, fabricated it real. We anticipation that was a joke, Alina. A cruel, atrocious joke. You wouldn't really bang your own parents out. You and Dad assumed to accept an actual ablaze abstraction of what an adolescent should or shouldn't do. I said, "I'm aloof afterward your new ancestors model. Mike is your alone child. I'm aloof a above business associate. How can you be so cold? She cried. We're your family. You were my ancestors. Aback you all nodded as Dad admired I didn't exist. Were you my ancestors? Aback you alleged me. Not to see if I was okay, but to demand I pay for Mike's office? You can't accept it both ways, Mom. You can't amusement me like a stranger, like an ATM, and a fresh address to me as a daughter. It doesn't work. The argumentation is flawed. I heard my ancestor grab the phone. You anticipate you're so acute with your logic, he yelled. You've consistently been a cold, unfilling girl, aloof like a machine. You accept no heart, Alina. A machine? I said. You're right. I am. I'm the apparatus you all built. I'm the apparatus that formed 80-hour weeks to armamentarium your lifestyles. I'm the apparatus that candy your blame and your ingratitude and still argument out money. But this apparatus is offline permanently. I afraid up. I knew this was far from over. They were wounded, cornered, and affliction of all, acutely humiliated. My father's complete identity was congenital on actuality, the acknowledged patriarch. I hadn't aloof cut off his money. I had cut off his faculty of self. The abutting battle happened to anniversary later. The auditor's basic address had appear in, and it was devastating. Ben had a biting a affair at his office. I requested a serb that Mike be there. I had a activity he wouldn't come. So, I beatific him a baby adorable text. If you appetite to altercate a abeyance severance package, be at my lawyer's appointment tomorrow at 10 a.m. He was there 5 minutes aboriginal acid of clothing I'd apparently paid for. He looked thin, stressed, and angry. Okay, Alina, he said as I absolved into the appointment room. Ben sat at the arch of the table. This is ridiculous. You've made your point. You're ruining us. What do you want? I appetite to go over your severance package, I said, sitting down across from him. Ben, the attic is yours. Ben opened a file. Mr. Last Name, he said. We've conducted a basic analysis of the aftermost 3 entities you founded, starting with Artisan Hasty Co-op. Mike palled. What's what audit? My audit, I said. As the primary broker and 50% bashful accomplice in all 3 ventures, I'm advantaged to 1. Ben slid an arbitrary area beyond the table. What we found, Mike, is not. Just an alternation of bootless businesses. What we begin is a connected multi-year pattern of what looks to my able eye actual abundant like wire fraud. Mike's jaw dropped. Fraud? What are you? That's slander, is it? Ben said, his voice cottony smooth. Let's attending at Mike's active dash. You submitted an investor's report to Alina Well to her ancestor's appointment, requesting $80,000 for app development and server scaling. But our accountant began that the app was a $500 template you bought online. The server ascent was a $50 a ages web hosting plan. They added $4,500. He broke an additional sheet. We found receipts for a affluence car lease, a vacation to AA, and 3 artist watches. Mike looked like he was going to be sick. He looked at me, his eyes advanced with panic. Alina, it was startup expenses. Architecture the brand, I repeated, my voice quiet. You blanket from me, Mike. You didn't aloof fail. You actively advisedly blanket from me. You stole from your own sister who was alive herself into the arena so you could go to Atha. He stammered, his bravado completely gone, replaced by the abashed adolescent he'd consistently been. Dad said it was fine. He said the money was aloof there. He said you wouldn't alike notice. It was aloof ancestors' money. There it is again. I said ancestors' money. I leaned forward. There is no family money, Mike. There is alone my money, and you've committed assorted felonies with it. He started to breach down, his face crumbling. Alina, please. You can't accelerate me to jail. Please, I'll pay it back. I'll do anything. There's your severance package, Mike, I said, continuing up. My silence. I'm not going to columnist charges. I'm not activity to sue you for the bisected actor dollars you've baseborne from me over the aftermost 10 years. My amalgamation to you is my absence. I am walking abroad, and I am demography my houses, my cars, and my money with me. You are free, Mike. Free to go get a complete job and body a complete activity after me there to ruin it for you. I affronted to Ben. Ben, if you'll accord my brother the abounding analysis report, I'm abiding he and Dad's advocate will acquisition it alluring reading. I absolved out of the room, abrogation him ball at the appointment table. The aboriginal above battle was over. I hadn't aloof burst his perception. I'd burst the complete apparition his activity was congenital on. The aureate adolescent was in actuality a accepted thief, and now he knew that I knew. The acknowledge of the audit sent a shock beachcomber through the family. Mike, in his terror, charge accepted aggregate to our parents. The dynamic shifted instantly. The angry, acrimonious buzz calls stopped. They were replaced by a new, added, atrocious tactic, a absolute apply campaign. My father, Richard, went into overdrive. He began calling continued family, painting me as a cold, avenging monster. I heard from my aunt, the aforementioned one who had nodded at the banquet table, who alleged to acquaint me she was acutely aghast in me. "Your father is a appreciative man, Elena," she said, her articulation decrepit with judgment. "And you've taken aggregate from him. He's broken. And your brother, he's a acceptable boy. He aloof fabricated some mistakes. Family is declared to forgive. Ancestors is additionally not declared to ambition one of their associates non-existent." "Aunt Carol," I retorted, "and mistakes is a actual acceptable chat for admirable larceny. You were at the dinner. You nodded. So, with all due respect, your assessment on my family's dynamics is not article I value." I afraid up, but their agony was escalating. My mother Susan was still struggling, bent amid her snake of a bedmate and her fraudster son. She was the one still in the house with Richard, alert to his rages, watching their apple dissolve. She tried an altered approach. She showed up at my accommodation unannounced. I opened the aperture to acquisition her standing in the hallway, attractive abate, and earlier than I'd any time apparent her. "Elena," she said, her articulation trembling. "Please let me in. Let's aloof talk." I hesitated, a fresh step aside. She absolved into my clean, quiet accommodation, and looked about as if seeing it for the aboriginal time. "This is actual nice," she said. "What do you want, Mom?" She sat on the bend of my sofa. "Your father, he's not himself. He's talking about how his activity is over. He's adage abhorrent things. This is antibacterial him." "Elena, he destroyed this," I said, actual standing. "He congenital this entire family on a lie. That Mike was the approaching, and I was the utility. He accomplished Mike that my work, my money was his tata. Key, he acclaimed it. The alone affair that's afflicted is that I'm no longer advantageous for the lie. But it's not a lie," she insisted, her abnegation still powerful. "Mike, he's aloof, he's not acceptable with details. He has the ideas. He has the vision. You were declared to be the support. I was not abutment, Mom. I was the antecedent, and the antecedent is dry." "Please, Elena," she begged. The tears coming now. Aloof the house. Let us accumulate the house. We'll pay rent. Your ancestor can. He can get a complete job." The words pay higher and complete job sounded so foreign, so cool advancing from her aperture that I about laughed. "He's 61, Mom, and the abode is a count over a actor dollar. The mortgage, which I pay, is $5,000 a month. The taxes are another $2. Can he get a job that will abutment that?" She crumpled. "We have nowhere to go. We accept no money. The accounts, they're all empty. You've larbored us with nothing. I larbored you with exactly what you had afore I started my career. I adapted her. You're in the same position you would be in if I had his dad admired never existed. This is the reality you asked for. You're a monster," she whispered, the tears stopping, replaced by a algid hatred, a cold, unfeeling monster. "You're no babe of mine. That's the additional time my parentage has been revoked in a month," I said. Aperture the door. "I anticipate I've assuredly gotten the message. Goodbye, Mom." She stormed out, and as I bankrupt the door, I knew the final battle was coming. They had approved anger. They had approved guilt. They had approved shaming. They had failed. The final allotment of the case accustomed to canicule later. The full-bound analysis report. It was worse than I thought. Mike hadn't aloof been stealing. He had on 2 occasions artificial my agenda signature on accommodation applications, using my name and my assets as collateral. He had committed character theft. Ben was clear. This is no longer an ancestor squabble, Elena. This is a multi-year abomination akin crime. Your brother could go to Bastille for an actual continued time. I captivated the address in my hands. This was it. This was the irrefutable proof. This was the key that would either lock him abroad, or perhaps unlock a final adverse truth. My ancestors was still in denial, still trying to acrylic me as the villain. They bare to see. They bare to understand. They had pushed me from victim to strategist. Now they would blame me from strategist to executioner. The alone catechism was what anatomy that beheading would take. The final showdown was set, not by me but by my father. With the boot date looming, beneath than 2 weeks away, he fabricated one aftermost desperate, affecting move. He alleged for an ancestors meeting, an appellation that in our ancestors meant a tribunal. He summoned the continued family, Aunt Carol, Uncle David, and a few others to the abode on Willow Creek. It was a public awkward advised to bend me to use the abounding weight of ancestors' acumen to force me to capitulate. He beatific me a text. We are all affair at the abode on Sunday at 300 p.m. Be there. It's time to end this. I replied with one word. Okay. I accustomed at 300 p.m. on the dot. I wasn't the fragile beat woman who had absolved out of this abode 6 months ago. I was clear-eyed, rested, and armed. I was acid a sharp, well-tailored blazer, and I was accustomed to briefcase. In it was the apprenticed audit report and an archetype of the boot order. I absolved into the active room. It was the aforementioned allowance they'd all nodded in. My ancestor sat in his high-backed armchair like a barren captivation a declining court. My mother was beside him, red-eyed and trembling. Mike was there continuing by the broiler attractive bacon cave out. Aunt Carol and Uncle David sat on the sofa, their faces set in austere judgmental lines. Alina, my ancestor began, his articulation attempting an accent of magnanimous wounded authority. Thank you for coming. We are all actuality as ancestors because we are deeply acutely anxious about you. I about smiled. Anxious about me. This attack join us, he jested vaguely. This cruelty, it's not you, Alina. You've let your success adulteration you. You're throwing your own ancestors out on the street. Your mother and I, we accept boilerplate to go. Your brother, you've broke him. He's a good boy, Aunt Carol murmured. All boys accomplish mistakes. I stood in the centermost of the room. Absolution them all except their say. I let the weight of their acumen ample the space. Are you finished? I asked, my articulation acid through the abundant silence. My father, befuddled off, aloof, stared at me. Good. I placed my briefcase on the coffee table and clicked it open. Let's ablaze up a few of your concerns. First, this isn't a campaign. It's the acknowledged disentanglement. You alarm at cruelty. I alarm at a consequence. You admired I was not your child. I accept obliged. You are now artlessly bodies I acclimated to know. I turned to my aunt and uncle. And you, I said, my articulation sharp. You're rye, GHT Aunt Carol. I accept been poisoned. I was berserk for 34 years by ancestors that taught me that my alone bulk was what I could provide. I was berserk by the acceptance that if I aloof formed harder, if I aloof gave more, I would assuredly be enough. But I was never enough. I was just useful. I looked at Mike. You, I said, are not an acceptable boy who made mistakes. You are a 30-year-old man who committed fraud. I took the analysis report from my attaché and threw it on the table. It landed with the abundant definitive thud. What is that? My ancestor demanded. That, I said, is a abounding argumentative analysis of the aftermost 10 years of advance into Mike. That is affidavit of wire fraud. That is affidavit of admirable larceny. That is proof, and my articulation dropped, of character annexation and forgery. That is affidavit that your aureate adolescent didn't aloof make mistakes. He's a criminal. He artificial my name on accommodation applications. He acclimated my assets to dedicated allotment for trips to AA and affluence cars. All while cogent me, his business was failing. Aunt Carol gasped. My father's face went from red to a ailing mottled white. Mike just stared at the address as if it were a bomb. You're lying, my ancestor stammered, but his articulation had no conviction. Am I? I affronted to Mike. Go on, Mike. Acquaint them. Tell them it's a lie. Acquaint them you didn't abduct bisected actor dollars from me. Acquaint them you didn't coin my signature. Go on. Mike looked at me. His eyes advanced with pure, unadulterated terror. He looked at our father. He opened his mouth, but no complete came out. He was trapped. And in that moment, he broke. He told me to. Micah back screamed, pointing a afraid feel at our father. He told me to. He said it was fine. He said she'll never no. It's aloof money. She has plenty. He helped me do the accommodation applications. He said it was smart financing. The allowance imploded. My mother let out an acute wail. My aunt and uncle looked at my father, their expressions of acumen now access to ones of authentic abhorrence and disgust. My father, Richard, he aloof deflated. The Baron was dead. The bravado, the arrogance, the authority, it all drained out of him. Abrogation, a small, pathetic, abashed old man in a chair he no best owned. He had been exposed, not aloof as a bully, but as a co-conspirator, a failed, anxious man who had acclimated his own son to abduct from his daughter. "You," my ancestor whispered, staring at Mike with venom. "You weak, brainless boy. And you," I said, my articulation campanology with finality, "are a thief, Dad. You're aloof a common. Affecting bandit who was so jealous of his daughter's success that he'd rather breach her bottom word and abduct from her than any time already aloof. Say, congratulations." I best up the archetype of the boot apprehension and placed it neatly on top of the analysis report. "The boot stands," I said to the abashed room. "You accept 13 canicule to abandon my property. If you are not out by then, I will accept the sheriff abolish you." I affronted to my mother. "Mom, you can appear with me right now. You can leave him. I will set you up in an apartment. I will booty affliction of you. But if you breach with him, you are part of this. You are allotment this." My mother looked at my father, this small broken man. She looked at Mike, who was ball in the corner. Afresh she looked at me, her eyes abounding of a new, different kind of hatred, a abhorrence for the actuality who had effected the choice. "Get out," she whispered. "Get out of my house." "It's not your house, Mom," I said, my articulation softer now, brave with a deep, abstruse sadness. It never was. I zipped up my attaché and absolved out of the room. I larbored them all there in the charcoal of the ancestors they had built. The silence abaft me added final than any explosion. The atrophy was not affecting a blaze crash. It was a slow, quiet, assured collapse. The 13 days passed. On the 14th day, as promised, the sheriff's assembly accustomed at the abode on Willow Creek. My parents were not there. They had, in the asleep of night, abashed out, abrogation the abode in the accompaniment of disarray, appliance overturned, trash on the carpets. It was a final petty act of defiance. It bulked me a significant bulk to accept it cleaned. But it was the aftermost analysis I would any time address for them. I put the abode on the market. It'll wash in a week. Richard and Susan, as I abstruse after from my aunt, moved into a baby one-bedroom rental accommodation an hour away. The shock of their new absoluteness was profound. My father, bare of his status, his accomplished house, and his club memberships, fell into a deep, bashful depression. My mother was affected to get a job for the aboriginal time in 30 years as an accountant at a local grocery abundance aloof to accomplish ends meet. Mike, abashed of prosecution, disappeared. He larbored town, effective about out west, and cut off all acquaintance with the family. The blackmail of the audit, the accurate affidavit of his crim. Ease was advantage I never had to use. It was abundant that he knew it existed. He would absorb the blow of his activity attractive over his shoulder, and that I absentatively was amends enough. The continued ancestors already my father's loyal chorus fell silent. They had apparent the accuracy and the abashment of it was total. Aunt Carol beatific me one abbreviate email. "I am so actual sorry, Alina, we never knew." I didn't reply. For me, activity became quiet. The connected, low-level bombinate of my family's demands and disappointments, a babble I had lived with for so continued I hadn't alike noticed it, was assuredly gone. I went to work. I saw my friends. I traveled. I caked the money I had already funneled into the ancestors' assurance into things that mattered. I founded and funded the Alina Aftermost Name Scholarship for Women in STEM, a affairs accurately advised to abutment young, brilliant women from unsupportive or difficult ancestors' backgrounds. I met the Aboriginal chic of recipients, 4 bright, ambitious adolescent women with blaze in their eyes, and I told them, "Your success is yours. Don't any time let anyone accomplish you feel baby for it." About a year after the showdown, I accustomed a letter. It was from my mother. It wasn't a address for money or a demand. It was a loofah letter. She wrote that my ancestor was in therapy. She wrote that her job was hard, but that for the Aboriginal time in her life, the money she captivated in her duke, acquainted like her own. She wrote 3 simple words that I had waited my entire life to hear. "I am so sorry. You were right." I apprehend the letter, bankrupt it, and put it in a drawer. It was a start, a tentative, brittle arch beyond a chasm I had not created, but had been affected to cross. I didn't alarm her, not yet. But for the Aboriginal time, I anticipation that maybe one day I might. My activity was my own. I had congenital my systems, dedicated them, and afresh rebuilt them from the arena up. My ancestors had admired I was